Vietnam versus France. Dien Bien Phu, 1954. Before Vietnam fought America, they had to deal with France first. And the way they won is something most people have never heard. And it's genuinely unbelievable. The French built a massive fortress at Dien Bien Phu, surrounded by hills. They were confident because they believed there was physically no way to drag heavy artillery up those jungle mountains. Military engineers literally said it was impossible. General Vo Nguyen Giap said, "Watch me." He ordered tens of thousands of porters, many of them women, to disassemble heavy cannons and haul them piece by piece through impossible terrain using modified bicycles. Yes, bicycles. They reinforced the frames to carry up to 200 kilograms of supplies each. Thousands of these human-powered supply chains snaked through the jungle for weeks. When Vietnamese artillery suddenly opened fire from above, the French commander reportedly broke down crying. After 57 brutal days of siege, France surrendered. This single battle ended over a century of French colonialism in Indochina. And it started with bicycles. Before we move on to the next battle, don't forget to watch our latest video on the Epstein files after this video ends. Thank you. Ethiopia versus Italy. Battle of Adwa, 1896. During the scramble for Africa, European powers carved up the continent like a birthday cake. Ethiopia looked at that and said, "We're not on the menu." But here's what most people don't know. The whole war started because of a translation trick. Italy wrote two versions of the Treaty of Wuchale. The Italian version basically made Ethiopia an Italian protectorate, while the Amharic version said no such thing. Emperor Menelik II discovered the deception and was absolutely furious. So when Italy invaded in 1896, this wasn't just a military fight, it was personal. Menelik II assembled around 100,000 troops, and his wife, Empress Taitu Betul, personally led cavalry charges. A queen on the battlefield, leading charges. At the Battle of Adwa, they annihilated the Italian forces so thoroughly that Italy had to recognize Ethiopian sovereignty. Ethiopia remained one of only two African nations never colonized during the entire colonial era. And it started because they actually read the fine print. Finland versus the Soviet Union. The Winter War, 1939 to 1940. Stalin looked at Finland, whose population was 3.7 million, and sent over 600,000 Soviet troops. He expected it to take maybe 2 weeks. It lasted 3.5 months, and it cost the Soviets somewhere around 125,000 to 170,000 dead. Now everyone talks about Simo Häyhä, the legendary sniper with over 500 kills. Absolute monster. But here's what most people don't know. The Finns invented a tactic called mati, named after a Finnish unit of firewood measurement. They would let large Soviet columns advance deep into Finnish territory along narrow forest roads, then cut them into isolated pockets, like chopping a log into pieces. Trapped Soviet units, surrounded in -40-degree weather, literally froze to death in their tanks. Finnish ski troops would glide silently through the forest, strike, and vanish like ghosts. The Soviets had tanks and planes. The Finns had cross-country skis and Molotov cocktails, which, fun fact, were literally named during this war. The Finns called them Molotov cocktails as a sarcastic response to Soviet Foreign Minister Molotov claiming bombing raids were actually food deliveries. So the Finns said, "Here's a drink to go with the food." Finland lost some territory in the peace deal, but it kept its independence, its democracy, and its legendary sense of dark humor. Haiti versus Napoleon's France, 1791 to 1804. This is the one that genuinely gives me chills, and it's criminal how little it's taught in schools. Enslaved people, human beings who were legally classified as property, rose up and defeated the army of Napoleon Bonaparte. The same Napoleon who was steamrolling across Europe couldn't handle a Caribbean island. But here's what most people miss. The Haitians used biological warfare. Sort of. They knew that European soldiers died from yellow fever in tropical climates at horrifying rates. Haitian generals, particularly Jean-Jacques Dessalines, deliberately prolonged engagements during rainy season, forcing French troops to remain in mosquito-heavy lowlands. Napoleon sent 40,000 soldiers. Yellow fever and Haitian fighters wiped out nearly all of them. Napoleon lost so badly and was so disgusted by the whole affair that he essentially rage-quit the Western Hemisphere. He sold the entire Louisiana territory to America for roughly $15 million. That's about 4 cents an acre. So if you're American and you live anywhere from Montana to Louisiana, You're basically living on land that exists because Haiti embarrassed Napoleon so badly he wanted nothing to do with this side of the ocean anymore. Haiti became the first free black republic in human history, and the world punished them for it. France forced Haiti to pay reparations to former slave owners for the next 122 years. The debt wasn't fully paid off until 1947. Let that sink in. Korea versus Japan. Admiral Yi Sun-sin, 1592 to 1598. If you don't know Admiral Yi Sun-sin, I need you to stop everything and pay attention because this man might be the most underrated military genius in human history. Japan invaded Korea with around 158,000 battle-hardened samurai. Korea's land army basically folded immediately. Total disaster on land. It looked like game over. Then Admiral Yi showed up. Here's what blows my mind and nobody talks about. Before the war, Yi was actually demoted and tortured by his own government because of political rivals spreading lies about him. They stripped him of rank, threw him in prison, and beat him nearly to death. When Japan invaded and Korea's navy got destroyed without him, the king was basically forced to put him back in command. He was given 13 ships. 13. Japan had 133 warships at the Battle of Myeongnyang. Yi used the narrow strait's vicious tidal currents to funnel the Japanese fleet and destroyed 31 ships without losing a single one. 13 versus 133. That's not inspirational. That's mathematically offensive. He was killed in his final battle, and his last words were reportedly, "Do not announce my death." Even dying, the man was strategizing. Afghanistan versus the British Empire, 1842. The British Empire, controlling a quarter of the planet, marched into Afghanistan in 1839, expecting an easy buffer state against Russian expansion. By January 1842, approximately 16,500 British and Indian soldiers and camp followers began retreating from Kabul. One European made it to Jalalabad alive. One Dr. William Bryden arrived on a dying horse, and when asked where the rest of the army was, he reportedly said, "I am the army." But here's what most people never learn. The retreat wasn't just a military defeat, it was a logistical catastrophe fueled by arrogance. British officers brought their fine china, their fancy furniture, and their personal servants on a military campaign through mountain passes in January. They were more worried about maintaining the appearance of civilized gentlemen than actually surviving. Afghan forces picked them apart in the narrow Kurd Kabul Pass, while British officers debated proper tea service. You genuinely can't make this stuff up. An empire fell apart in a mountain pass partly because its officers couldn't leave their silverware behind. Mongolia versus every empire that existed. Wait, Mongolia was an underdog? Before Genghis Khan? Absolutely yes. The Mongols were scattered nomadic tribes with no cities, no infrastructure, no written language, and no permanent military. Their enemies, the Jin dynasty, the Khwarezmian Empire, had walled cities, millions of citizens, and centuries of military tradition. But here's what nobody tells you about why the Mongols were so effective. It wasn't just brutality. Genghis Khan ran the most sophisticated intelligence network in the medieval world. Before invading any nation, he sent merchants and spies years in advance to map trade routes, identify political divisions, and spread misinformation. He basically invented psychological operations before the term existed. He also employed engineers and specialists from every conquered nation. Chinese siege engineers helped him take Persian cities. Persian administrators helped him govern Chinese territories. The man was running a multinational corporation of conquest. Starting from literally nothing, he built the largest contiguous land empire in human history. The ultimate rags-to-world domination story. Vietnam versus the United States 1955 to 1975. Yes, Vietnam appears twice on this list because honestly, they earned it. The United States spent roughly $843 billion in today's money on the Vietnam War. They deployed over 500,000 troops, dropped more bombs on Vietnam than all of World War II combined. Let that number hit you. And deployed chemical weapons like Agent Orange that poisoned the land for generations. Vietnam's response? Tunnels. The Cu Chi tunnel network is genuinely mind-blowing and most people don't grasp the scale. We're talking about over 250 kilometers of underground passages that included hospitals, weapons factories, sleeping quarters, kitchens with specially designed smokeless stoves, and even classrooms for children. Some tunnels were so well hidden that American bases were literally built on top of them without knowing. American soldiers called the guerrilla fighters ghosts because they would attack, then literally disappear into the ground. America versus the British Empire, 1775 to 1783. The OG underdog story, but I want to tell you the parts your history class probably skipped. Everyone knows the broad strokes. Colonies rebel, Washington crosses the Delaware. France helps. America wins. But nobody talks about how close it came to complete failure. At one point, the Continental Army was down to about 3,000 soldiers. Desertion was so bad that Washington wrote letters saying he feared the revolution would die a natural death. Soldiers at Valley Forge were leaving bloody footprints in the snow because they had no shoes. No shoes. In a Pennsylvania winter. And here's one detail I personally find fascinating. A Prussian officer named Baron von Steuben, who was essentially escaping personal scandals in Europe, showed up at Valley Forge and single-handedly transformed Washington's freezing, starving amateurs into an actual disciplined army. He couldn't speak English, so he wrote drills in French, had them translated to English, and personally swore at soldiers in 3 languages. America's survival literally depended on a German fugitive who communicated through a translator and creative profanity. History is so much stranger than fiction. Switzerland versus Burgundy, 1470s. Switzerland is everyone's favorite neutral country. Chocolate, watches, banking. Very civilized, right? What most people don't realize is that Switzerland earned its neutrality by being absolutely terrifying in combat. In the 1470s, Charles the Bold of Burgundy, one of the richest and most powerful rulers in Europe, decided to conquer the Swiss. He had professional armies, the best equipment money could buy, and the finest cavalry in Europe. The Swiss had pikemen, mountain farmers with very long sticks and very bad attitudes. At the Battle of Grandson, the Swiss charged so aggressively that the Burgundian army panicked and fled, abandoning Charles's entire treasury, including hundreds of tapestries, diamonds, and one of the largest gems in Europe. Charles lost his army, his fortune, and eventually his life at the Battle of Nancy, where his body was found days later half-eaten by wolves. After that, Europe collectively decided that invading Switzerland was a terrible idea. They've been neutral for over 500 years, not because they're peaceful, but because everyone remembers what happened to the last guy who tried. Paraguay versus the Triple Alliance, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, 1864 to 1870. I'm ending with this one because it's the most devastating underdog story most people have never heard. And honestly, it's hard to even talk about. Paraguay, under President Francisco Solano Lopez, went to war against Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay simultaneously. 3 countries including Brazil, the largest nation in South America. Now here's what you need to understand. Paraguay didn't technically win this war. They lost, badly. But the level of resistance they put up belongs on every underdog list ever made. Paraguay lost an estimated 60 to 90% of its total population. Some estimates say up to 90% of its male population was killed. Toward the end, the army was literally composed of children carrying sticks painted to look like rifles. Women took over all agricultural and economic roles and essentially kept the nation from disappearing entirely. Lopez fought until he was killed in 1870, reportedly saying, "I die with my nation." Paraguay survived as a country. Barely. The demographic damage was so severe it took over a century to recover. Every March 1st, Paraguay observes Heroes' Day. They didn't win the war, but they refused to stop existing. And sometimes that is the victory.